Donald Trump will become.
Donald Trump has been elected.
President of the United States is Donald Trump.
Hey, look what happened. Is this crazy?
After Donald Trump's decisive win in the U.S. presidential election, we look at his campaign pledge to put an end to America's wars.
I've been to regions with wars in the military, and I have never seen this much killing in my entire life under this administration.
But can Trump rein in the United States' support for Israel and deliver peace where Biden and Harris failed?
I did serve under President Trump, but one thing that I learned about his administration is that things are a bit unpredictable under him.
Hello, I'm Rida Fakhri. Welcome to the program. Today, we focus on one of the most potentially consequential U.S. elections of our time, Donald Trump's return to the White House. What does his sweeping victory mean for the Middle East, amid concerns of a regional war with Iran and the devastating impact of Israel's ongoing assault on Gaza? The election highlighted Americans' disapproval of the Biden-Harris record. Trump, meanwhile, promised to stop America's endless wars.
I want to see the Middle East get back to peace, and real peace, but a peace that's going to be a lasting peace. And that's going to happen. I feel really, truly confident.
Many young and undecided voters expressed dismay at the Democrats' continued military support for Israel, despite the atrocities in Gaza.
I think we as a nation, as American citizens, need to let these politicians know that we are no longer standing by and that we are holding you guys all accountable.
I'm hoping that we can punish the Democratic Party for everything that's happened in the past year, to show them that we're not going to have unconditional support.
One of the crucial factors behind Trump's victory in the swing state of Michigan, home to one of the largest Muslim populations in the United States, was the support he received from Arab Americans. In a few moments, I'll be speaking with the mayor of Dearborn Heights, a key Trump ally, about the Republicans' electoral success in Michigan. But first, we're joined by Hala Rharrit, a former State Department official who resigned in protest of the Biden administration's policy on Gaza. Hala Rharrit, a few months before the elections, you urged Kamala Harris to take a few concrete steps in line with U.S. laws when it comes to weapons transfers to Israel, to, quote, strengthen the Democratic base and potentially bring back uncommitted and youth voters without whom, you said, Harris could very well lose the election. Did you see this stunning defeat coming?
Well, Rida, thank you very much for having me. Absolutely, we saw it coming. And I think for anyone paying attention, it was abundantly clear that the Democratic Party was going to lose. The uncommitted vote was very powerful. They went beyond their aim in terms of their delegates in Michigan early on during the elections, during still the primary season. They went beyond Michigan to other states. It was abundantly clear that Americans had had an awakening. They had had an awakening, and the fact that while Americans are struggling and are suffering, if you think about 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, but then we're seeing at the same time billions and billions of our hard-earned tax dollars being sent to military assistance to Israel to massacre children. It was unacceptable, and it was abundantly clear from the election results that many Democrats, that many liberals and left-wing supporters of the Democratic Party decided not to vote for Kamala Harris.
You said that she could have corrected course. She could have taken those few concrete actions in line with U.S. laws. Why didn't she?
I think because she was beholden to those that are supporting her financially. And that is abundantly clear. I've spoken since my resignation very loudly about the lethal combination of the arms industry with the pro-Israel lobby. And unfortunately, she, like others before her, like President Biden, chose to represent them instead of representing the American people. And instead of representing the Democratic Party, who are an estimated 80% of Democrats want a ceasefire. Yet despite the rhetoric coming out of her campaign of we want a ceasefire, she continued to willfully in the Biden-Harris administration, and I'm going to repeat this, willfully continue to violate U.S. law by surging U.S. military assistance to Israel. It was abundantly clear to so many experts, not just those of us who were actually in government, but experts across the board, that our current policy is in violation of not just international law, but U.S. law as well. but she didn't want to change course because she was worried about the ramifications that would have on her donors. She listened to her donors instead of listening to the people, and the results are her loss. And the hope now is that the Democratic Party wakes up and realizes that if they continue on this course, they will continue to lose America.
To what extent do Democrats take voters like the Arab American voters in the United States, but also the undecideds and the youth voters for granted?
Oh, very much so. I mean, and we saw this all during her campaign, right? When protesters were asking for a ceasefire during her campaign speech, and she very arrogantly said, "Excuse me, I am speaking." I mean, she's speaking to voters. She's speaking to her constituents. And the fact that she refused to meet with anyone from the uncommitted delegation, she refused to meet with Arab Americans who lost loved ones. And I'm going to stress, these are American citizens who lost loved ones in the conflict. And her campaign refused to meet with them. And they assumed throughout all of that they were going to still secure their vote because of the fear of Trump.
What was the turning point, do you think? I mean, we also know that Bill Clinton was sent to Michigan to speak to Arab American voters.
Yes.
And in fact, his message was tone deaf, according to many.
It was disastrous. It was condescending. Quite bluntly, it was racist. It didn't acknowledge the existence and the suffering of the Palestinians. It was extremely one-sided. But on the other hand, and very surprisingly, and I have to admit, I myself was surprised to see Donald Trump go to Dearborn, Michigan, the first presidential candidate to ever go to Dearborn, Michigan, and to court the Arab American vote a week or so before the election. It was so easy for the Harris campaign to reach out to Arab Americans, and not just Arab Americans, I want to stress, because it is a large swath of the American public that truly cares about what is happening in Gaza and is outraged that our tax dollars are going to fund a genocide. She could have done so little to reassure them, but she just stuck to the talking points over and over again with no heart, with no empathy, with no plan of action. And she insisted that she would not change course from President Biden's absolutely failed policy. And unfortunately, that completely alienated her campaign.
What was for you the tipping point? When did you decide that it was time to leave the Foreign Service after 18 years?
18 years is quite a long time. And I can tell you that it was a buildup. There was not a single event or single day where I said, that's it. But on the contrary, there were many, many, many days where I just could not believe the horror. And as part of my job, my last role was a spokesperson for the State Department in the Arab world. And in my job, I had to send daily reports to Washington explaining and showing what was happening in Gaza through the lens of pan-Arab media. And so I knew what my government was seeing because I was sending it to them. I was sending them proof of the massacres. I was sending them proof of potential US complicity. And for many months, I held hope that Washington would do something with this information, that they would act upon it. But then when I saw day after day that it was quite the contrary, they were doubling down on the policy. And I eventually began to be silenced and sidelined. Everyone in the Foreign Service got the message. And this has really been unprecedented in my 18-year career, where there's no ability to engage or debate. The policy is the policy.
Where did the message trickle down from? How responsible do you hold the leadership of the State Department, the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken?
It's directly from the top. And I can tell you, Rida, that career diplomats are completely disempowered, completely and utterly disempowered. Our voices were silenced, and our credibility, our merit, our expertise was pushed to the side. It was coming directly from the top, and no matter what type of reporting, analysis, factual reports were coming from the field, from diplomats, it was being pushed to the side, systematically pushed to the side. That is also one of the reasons why I eventually decided to resign, because I saw that there was no more point staying from within, and my effort to be much more effective speaking out publicly after resignation.
We know that every US administration is staunchly supportive of Israel. But did you see a level of support that you hadn't seen before?
Look, I'll be honest with you. I never expected the Biden administration to go this far. And I'll tell you why, Rita. When President Biden took office, one of the first things that he did was actually reinstitute funding to UNRWA that President Trump had reversed. He also appointed a special representative to Palestinian affairs, the first time in the State Department's history, because he said, if we want to be honest brokers, we have to speak to both sides. We have to build relations with Palestinian people, with Palestinian representatives. I actually had a lot of hope at the outset of his administration that there would be traction. And I can even tell you as a spokesperson, our talking points before October 7th were very much about trying to build peace between the two peoples. It was not as one-sided as it became. But obviously, after October 7th and the reaction that happened, it became perpetually worse and worse and worse.
And given all this, do you expect the situation in the Middle East and U.S. foreign policy towards Israel to get even worse under President Trump? You served under him in his first term in office. What do you expect to see?
Honestly, it's a bit unpredictable because there are two pulls at President Trump right now, or President-elect Trump, I should say. It is abundantly clear that he has pro-Israeli donors, massive donors that are trying to influence him to, as he previously said, help Netanyahu finish the job. It could go that way, where he's emboldening Netanyahu even further, including with the annexation of the West Bank, or it could go the completely opposite way, as he said in his last week on the campaign trail, where he announced in Michigan, they just want peace and I'm going to bring peace. I have to be honest, I did serve under President Trump, but one thing that I learned about his administration is that things are a bit unpredictable under him. And I think that depending who he surrounds himself with, we're going to be able to see how this policy is going to go.
You said the U.S. has willfully violated its own laws, as well as international law, international humanitarian law in Gaza. How has it affected its ability to advocate for human rights? In other words, to lecture the rest of the world on human rights?
It's decimated. And when I was still working for the Foreign Service, I was saying that on an everyday basis, that this policy is hurting the United States of America. And I, as an American diplomat, swore an oath to the Constitution, and it was my duty and my obligation to report that information to Washington. We are no longer seen as a nation of human rights, as a nation that defends freedom of press, freedom of expression. We can't. When we are willfully, again, and I use that word not lightly, but willfully violating laws like the Leahy vetting, Arms Export Control Act, Foreign Assistance Act. And I encourage all of your audience to just simply Google those laws. Those are American laws. We're not even talking about an international law, but American laws. And it is absolutely shameful that this administration has continued to do so for the sake of appealing to extremist factions within the state of Israel.
In just a couple of words, what do you think the Biden-Harris legacy will be? And what do you think the future holds for the United States under Trump?
Look, there's still some time left for this administration. And perhaps naively, I'm holding out hope. As I'm sure you know, Rida, Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin released a letter telling the state of Israel they had 30 days to basically clean up their act in terms of humanitarian assistance, or there will be repercussions. I mean, as a former spokesperson, I saw that clearly as a PR plot. But honestly, now that that Donald Trump has won the presidency, it gives them an opportunity to enact the change. They don't want Donald Trump to be the president that actually secures a ceasefire after they asked for a ceasefire for months and months and failed to achieve one. Now is the time to use U.S. leverage. Now is the time to cut military assistance in line with U.S. law and bring an end to this absolutely horrific tragedy. And they need to do that before the end of the year. President Biden's reputation and legacy is already tarnished. But at the very least, he can do this and salvage a little bit, or else it'll be absolutely obliterated when President Trump comes to power.
Hala Rharrit, former spokeswoman at the State Department. Such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
As Trump prepares to return to the White House following the Democrats' stunning defeat, we ask, what will his second presidency mean for countries in the region? During his first term, Trump took several steps that had profound implications on Israel-US relations and the wider Middle East. Here's a look back at some of them. In December 2017, Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, a break from decades of established US policy. In May 2018, he moved the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. In June 2018, the Trump administration withdrew the United States from the United Nations Human Rights Council, citing its alleged bias against Israel. In March 2019, Trump signed an executive order recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan, which is internationally recognized as Syrian territory. In 2020, the Trump administration brokered the so-called Abraham Accords, normalizing relations between Israel and 4 Arab states: Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, and Sudan. Trump also implemented what became known as the Muslim travel ban, restricting entry into the United States for nationals from several Muslim-majority countries. Despite this, Trump secured the endorsement of some Muslim leaders and state officials of Arab descent.
I have never seen the devastation that we're seeing right now. You know, when President Trump was president, it was peace. We didn't have any issues. There was no wars. He didn't create wars.
But can Trump deliver peace as he has promised his supporters? Bill Bazzi, who we just saw campaigning with Donald Trump in Michigan, joins us now. He is the first Muslim mayor of Dearborn Heights. Mayor Bazzi, you appeared at one of Donald Trump's final campaign rallies, throwing your full weight behind him, while some other Arab American mayors in Michigan refused to even meet him because of some of his previous positions and his so-called Muslim ban. What motivated you to endorse him?
Well, I've been watching everything that has been going on for the last close to 4 years with this current administration. And I'm seeing everything, the degradation, our economy is the state of our economy, what's going on overseas, especially the Middle East, and also with everybody basically threatening World War III, and people are alarmed of what's going on, and they need a commander-in-chief in the United States to speak up and just to make people feel better.
But when you look back at Trump's record when he was president, we saw an increased level of support for Israel and continued arms deals. You called him a man of peace. What makes you believe that he will bring peace to the region, that he will not be dragged into yet another disastrous war?
During the Trump administration, there was no new wars, even though, as you mentioned, we're sending money, weapons, or weapons support to Israel. There hasn't been to the level of violence that we're having here. And I have never seen it in my life that I grew up in a war, and also I've been to regions with wars in the military, and I have never seen this much killing in my entire life under this administration, and there's no end in sight.
But do you genuinely believe that Trump will reduce America's involvement in Israel's wars? You immigrated from the south of Lebanon. The south of Lebanon and Lebanon itself has been under Israeli bombardment. I mean, these are important issues. Do you think that Trump will be any different to Biden and Harris?
When President Trump was president at the time, there was no new wars. We had 2 wars. One in the Middle East was Iraq. We got dragged into a war with Iraq, and also in Afghanistan. And even during the Trump administration, he was talking to his advisors to stop the war in both countries. I did speak with him. Obviously, that's why I endorsed him, is because he's been talking about ending the wars. He just wants peace, and you can tell he's sick of it. And I can tell when I chatted with him, he was very genuine. You can see in his face that he just wants peace. He just wants to end the war.
Did you make any specific demands on behalf of the Arab and Muslim community in Michigan?
We did talk about how most people here, everybody here, and my constituents, and also my surrounding city, everybody's saying the same thing. All they want the war to stop, because everybody in my city that of Middle Eastern background, they either have ties in the Middle East, or they even have they have property or families. And also, a lot of us, including myself, we lost families during this war in Lebanon. And there's people that live in my city who are Palestinian background, and they too also lost families in Palestine.
And of course, the vote of the Arab and Muslim communities, especially in Michigan, such an important swing state, were crucial to Trump winning that state. I just wonder whether you did ask him for any specific guarantees and what his response was.
We did ask for peace, and it's not just myself. And, I wouldn't have made the endorsement if I felt that he was not genuine and he does not want to end the war.
But it's one thing, Mayor, it's one thing for him to say all the right things on the campaign trail. After all, he is trying to get those important votes. It's quite another for him to implement any specific policies that will fulfill the expectations of your community. You are critical of Biden's foreign policy, but do you believe that Trump will take a fundamentally different approach given the powerful pro-Israel lobby that supports him and the influential Jewish donors as well?
I agree. A lot of politicians, a lot of people running for office, they tell you something, they do something different. But when a president of the United States says that he's going to end the war, especially when you go back and you see during his time, he did not start new wars. And I feel that he will stop the war because I looked at the past and now what he's saying, this is something that Biden or Harris were not saying. In fact, they were not listening.
What do you and other members of the Muslim community in Michigan make of some of the disparaging comments he has made about Muslims in the past? He's called them a threat. He's also criticized them for living in their own world, not assimilating with the rest of American society. He said, Islam hates us, and, quote, Muslims harbor unbelievable hatred, and it's very hard to separate radical Islam from the religion as a whole. This is hardly a president who has shown any respect for the Muslim community.
Well, I can tell you, he showed more respect when he's been talking about how, when he came to our community, and he spoke to a lot of us here in actually my neighboring city. He's been saying a lot of great things. He's been and again he's been meeting with a lot of people in the community, and he's definitely much better than the current administration. I can tell you that, and I can tell you.
But you're saying this despite the Muslim ban that he instituted during his first term.
Well, I can tell you, if you look at the executive order has 7 countries that he had a hold on having people come from these countries. And if you look at how many Muslim countries we have in the world, it's way over 40 plus Muslim countries. He only had a ban on seven countries, which there was war, and there was like turmoil in most of these countries that he put ban on.
But are you still, hold on, Mayor, are you still saying this is okay for him to single out Muslim countries and to limit people from those countries from entering to the United States?
It wasn't Muslims. We have over 1 billion Muslims in the world. He didn't ban all the Muslims in the world to come to the United States. I mean, there's a bunch of Muslims in the United States now. Obviously, there's Muslims all over the world. And I can tell you, if you look at the actual executive order, it does not say Muslim bans. It just says ban from these countries. And right before President Trump took over, look at the turmoil that was going on in the Middle East. The turmoil created by the previous administration, Obama. For 8 years, the Middle East was in chaos. And look at Daesh, ISIS, how powerful they were in the Middle East. We didn't want that stuff over here.
Well, and yet he is a president who said it is very hard to separate radical Islam from the religion as a whole. Does that not concern you?
Yeah, I can tell you, like right now, what he's saying. He's saying that Muslim is a religion of peace. Even when he won the elections, look at the first thing he said.
We know Islamophobia is on the rise, though, Mayor. Are you not concerned by these types of statements?
It was on a rise more under Biden. I can tell you, under Biden administration, there was more Islamophobia here, and there's anti-Semitism here in the United States than I've ever seen it in my life. It was worse for us, for me, We had a child they slit his throat, because of his background under the Biden administration.
You criticize the Biden administration's policies and what could have happened under Kamala Harris. We know the result is a repudiation of the Democrats. But as much as many voters felt betrayed by them and their policies, many also feel nervous about how catastrophic it might be under Trump. What do you say to them?
So one of the biggest things that we've never had accountability for what's going on in the Middle East, and also for our weapons that we're supplying. Us in the military, we follow Geneva Convention. In Israel, it's like they don't follow it. They don't even know what the Geneva Convention is. So we have to make everybody, including Israel, to be accountable and to also follow the Geneva Convention that we have to follow. Since we're giving you a lot of the weapons, you have to be accountable as well.
Mayor Bill Bazzi, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
As Trump gets ready to reclaim the White House in January 2025, the region and the world are watching closely. For Arab Americans and communities with ties to Gaza, Lebanon, and beyond, his presidency presents both hope and uncertainty. The question remains, will a second Trump term bring the peace he promises, or will it tip the Middle East into further chaos? The world waits to see if his administration will inject less or more turmoil into an already combustible region. That's all from me, Rita Fakhri, and the team. Thanks for watching.